Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Annika Digital. It's myself, Anne Stanley. I'm CEO and founder, and I'm down in very rainy Cornwall today. So hopefully the Wi-Fi will be kind to me. And I'm with my normal partner in crime, Katie. Good morning, Katie.
Hey, hello. I'm in soggy Lincolnshire.
Oh, is it raining today?
It's not great today. Although it's not raining the rest of the day, apparently.
Oh, okay. And then we've got Ed, who glad to welcome you back. Morning, Ed. And you're Leicester, I guess.
Morning, all. Yeah, Annika HQ.
Yeah, I recognise those black radiators. And what's going to happen today is Ed is going to be talking about GA4. This is becoming, we're literally on a countdown now. It's only about 5 months away before Universal Analytics goes forever and you lose all your data. So it's becoming more and more crucial. I think we probably need to do an update like this every month. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a poll. So I'm going to hand over to Katie. Once we've done the poll, we'll disappear and help answer the chat. Then we'll reappear at the end, and then the video will be released in a couple of hours' time. Yes, we've got these new emojis and we're getting lots and lots of love, and I'm very jealous because, of course, nobody noticed them until the end of mine last time. And Ed's already getting a lot of love, always clicking the like button.
Yeah, he's doing it himself. Oh, yeah.
No hands, honestly.
Yeah, he's after the hand emoji. That's what he wants.
Okay, over to you, Katie. Let's do the poll.
Okay, let's go for it. So how much do you know about GA4 right now? So I'm a total beginner, not much. I'm hoping to use this very soon. We're using this now, but not sure what I'm doing. I'm using it, but we need to understand so much more about this and using this and feel I am an advanced user. So yeah, let's have a look at what you all are today.
Well, if there's anybody here that feels like they're an advanced user, can you just email me separately and we've probably got a job for you, because I don't think there's anybody that I know who feels that comfortable with GA4.
There's no one yet. It's 0%. So
how are we doing with the other scores then, Katie?
Okay, 24% total beginner, 31% not much. I'm hoping to use this very soon. 20% we're using it now, but I'm not really sure what I'm doing. And 27% we're using it, but I just need to know and understand so much more. So yeah, that's pretty much the firm mix today.
That's probably what we expected as well.
No advanced user apart from Ed.
I bet Ed didn't put that one either, did you, Ed?
No, and yeah, and if you are struggling with it, you're not alone, for sure. A lot of people, even experienced people who are using it, like myself, there's a lot of bugs still with it. It's contradictory, it's confusing in parts, and not so user friendly. So you are not alone if you are struggling with GA4 right now.
Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll let you go, Ed, and we'll see you about 5 to 10. So speak to you in a bit.
Okay, we'll be on chat, and obviously the recording will be available later as well, just so you know.
Great. Well, welcome, guys. So we were going to do this as a recording, as a pre-record, and just like put out what we did previously. But I thought, no, the audience deserves better. Let's do it live. Let's be here to answer any kind of Q&As, questions you might have. So we'll try and leave some space for some questions, because I know a lot of you will have questions about using GA4. Yeah, how to get what you need out of it. So this is very much going to be a kind of like a flyover recap of what you can do with it, some of the kind of stumbling points, some of the kind of nuances and differences and things you can expect with it. So as you probably know, here's the agenda. So we're going to go through what to expect, go through a bit of a kind of some of the kind of essential setup checks you probably need to do, make sure you've got in place already, just make sure you're collecting in the right way. Then we're going to talk around things you need to do for conversion tracking, which is the big one. Everyone needs to be able to ensure that they're tracking what they need and all the custom things that matter to their own business. And then it's then reporting on the data that's being collected. The primary thing is making sure that at least at this stage you're actually collecting the data, even if you don't know how to interpret it or report on it fully. The main thing right now is making sure that you've actually got GA4 on your site collecting data. Just a bit of a recap. July the 1st is when Universal Analytics will expire. So from that point on, GA3, which is the older version of analytics, which has been around for like the best part of a decade, will no longer be collecting data. Google is forcing everybody to upgrade to GA4, which really is a brand new rebuilt version of analytics. So it's not really a kind of upgrade as such. It's kind of like a transition to like a new product altogether, because like the way it collects data and how it's been built is quite different to universal analytics that everyone's been used to. Remember, like analytics, especially universal analytics, it's the most widely adopted web analytics platform out there. It's used on like about 92% of like all websites globally will use Google Analytics. Popularity is mainly because it's free and it's Google. It integrates with other Google tools and offers a lot of like user-friendly like reports that people liked. So if you've been used to interfaces and your universal analytics that looks like this, and these are properties, pixel codes on your website that begin with like the with UA. That means you're using universal analytics. So if you've been used to these types of reports, this type of interface, that is going away. You're then being forced onto using GA4 if you choose to from July. Of course, there's other alternative providers out there. You don't have to feel like you have to go onto GA4. By all means, like shop the market. There's other products out there, from Adobe Analytics to Piwik Pro, Matomo, and a list of other analytics. But the fact that GA4 is free and it has some familiarity with what you've been used to, I'd probably encourage you just to try it out at the very least. Get the code and pixel installed on your website. Chances are Google have previously stated that they're going to give about kind of 6 months leniency before they decide to cut off access altogether to your property. So not only will it stop collecting in July, come probably January 2024, you will no longer be able to access your old Universal Analytics account. So all the data you did have in that account, you will no longer have access to, and you'll have to think about ways of getting that data out. So exporting it out, keeping a record of it, and storing it in your own way. So these are the things you need to be aware of come that date. So takeaway message is install GA4, get the basic pixel onto your website now, and at the very least start collecting page view data, and then look to move on to collecting more custom conversions and things, and start tracking the things that are more kind of custom to you that you need to track. So one of my thoughts about GA4 so far, generally the kind of consensus is it's not great. It's not ready. This product has been launched, and it was launched initially very kind of like lightly in a very much of a kind of like a beta kind of state. So the product wasn't really ready, but they started releasing it out to the public anyway. You then start seeing the notices within your analytics account when you go in to encourage you to start using GA4. And it's not that fully fleshed out yet. They've done a lot over this past year to rapidly improve it. And they've undone a few of their mistakes. So, you know, they've made changes with the products, and then they've undone those changes and brought them back and put in fixes. So this is a product they're rapidly working on, but with that comes a whole bunch of problems. So it hasn't been too smooth, and it has frustrated a lot of users of GA4. If anyone has been using GA4 recently with something like Data Studio, and they've been making use of the GA4 API, for example, that's become really problematic. We've seen like reports break. We've seen big limitations being put down in terms of what you can extract from GA4. So they're kind of offering it to you on one hand, but then they're almost kind of like shooting themselves in the foot and making the product worse in other ways. But overall, I can see the potential, and provided that they address some of these current issues, I think it will be a much better tool than Universal. Universal Analytics would definitely need another upgrade, and I think we've got this. I think we've got the potential of like a good product here. Some of the good things, so we've got higher data collection limits and quotas, better cross-device capabilities, better engagement metrics, so better ways to be able to kind of measure engagement on the website now. More kind of time-based and more based on user interactivity than just simple page views, for example. There's improved custom reporting. The audience building functionality is really good, so you can create some really kind of powerful audiences, and then you can fire conversions based off of those audience conditions and things like that. The event-based model of it makes it really flexible. So it allows you to be able to kind of add in, pass in events, and be able to change events, modify events, with much more creative freedom than you could ever do in Universal Analytics. And it offers also much improved conversion tracking and attribution, which is mainly doing through improved data modeling and identification of users, because in the analytics world, that being able to track users and be able to tie sessions together to individual users is becoming increasingly difficult as third-party cookies are blocked, and the fact that the lifespan of cookies now is much shorter than it used to be. So there's a lot more artificial intelligence and conversion modeling being brought into GA4. Some of the kind of highlights for the not so good thing, I meant to mention the Data Studio thing. If anyone's out there using Data Studio dashboarding tool, GA4, that's pretty horrendous at the moment. So hopefully there'll be a fix for that. Some of the other things are lack of account level and report level filters. So being able to filter your data at a kind of top level, like if there's some traffic source you want to stop, or a particular domain you want to exclude, that is quite difficult to do at the moment, and is something that I hope they'll incorporate into GA4 going forward. Some of the default reports are not great, so they're a lot more limited, a lot more cut down. We're still missing some kind of key reports that we might have had in Universal Analytics. So much of the reporting you might want to do, you're going to want to do it as custom reports, or you would have used something like a dashboarding tool like Data Studio or Tableau, for example, to do the reporting, because some of the default reports not that great, won't always kind of give you what you need. No ability to customize the channel groupings at this point in time. So this is the ability to be able to organize and label how you want to group your traffic, different traffic types as it comes into GA4. No customization on those right now. Some of the metrics can be confusing, and the e-commerce reporting is somewhat limited when it comes to the default reports that you get within the interface. You'll notice report differences as well. So if you're trying to compare Universal with GA4, try not to kind of stress too much if you see differences, but instead understand that there will be differences between the different accounts, And obviously, if you're seeing big differences, then it's worth investigating what those differences might be. So typically, like GA4 uses, for example, active users instead of total users. So even the definition of a user is slightly different in GA4. An active user means they've actually engaged, they've taken some immediate action on the site rather than they've just like arrived and view the page and left. So they've got this term active user, and that is what you're seeing when you look at user data within GA4. So it's important to understand some of these definitions and actually what you're looking at when it comes to the metrics. Things like session counts, different calculations are used for session counts. These are often likely to be lower than you'd get in universal analytics. Attribution, the way it actually attributes credit to different campaigns and traffic sources, is set differently to how universal analytics was set. So it uses a data-driven campaign attribution model as opposed to a last non-direct click model. Data retention is limited to a maximum of 14 months. So it doesn't hold on and retain user level data. Your standard reports aren't affected, but what this means is that individual user data that you store is affected. So if you're doing kind of any segmentation or anything like that, it means that the detail of what you can get on a user will automatically be wiped after 14 months. So it doesn't withhold information as long as Universal Analytics did. Bounce rate, they took it away, they then brought it back, but it uses a slightly different calculation to that of Universal Analytics. Conversion counts are counted on every event rather than once per session or once per visit as they were previously.
Before you go on, Ed, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Could you just explain what you mean by conversion attribution? Because there's a lot of complete beginners in here. So there's a couple of words you've mentioned like API and conversion attribution, which if you're not in the business, you probably won't know what they mean. I've explained what Data Studio is and you've repeated it anyway, but I mean, the Facebook was a good example when we did an analysis of GA3 versus GA4. The total revenue was right, but the difference between Facebook revenue was way out.
Yeah. So attribution is all about the way credit is assigned to different touch points. So if you think of like a journey to purchase, for example, there might be different traffic sources involved in driving that customer to convert. So maybe I come in via Facebook one day, and then the next day I come back to the website, I come back via a search engine, and I then purchase something on the site. In that scenario, which traffic source should get the credit? Should it be the traffic source that brought the user to the site in the first instance, or should it be the one that brought it in the last instance when the user actually converted? So Universal Analytics would have traditionally just given all credit to like the last touch point, whereas GA4 is doing it slightly differently and is using a data-driven campaign attribution. So it's basically spreading out conversion credit across more than one channel if more than one channel was involved in that process. So look into that. It's called GA4 attribution. By all means, read into that a little bit more. I've included a bit of a glossary in here. These are just some of the kind of key ones to understand. So a session is a visit, for example, and that's denoted by the session start event. And it's a period of time the user is actively engaged in your website. We've got engaged sessions, which is a metric based on people who actually spent more than 10 seconds or viewed more than 2 pages, for example, on the website. So it's basically, you think of it like a alternative metric to bounce rate. And engagement rate is a percentage of people that were engaged, sessions. Total users is the total number of users, which aligns directly with Universal Analytics. New users is the number of active users who have previously had no sessions, so they're brand new first time people as far as Google Analytics is concerned. And then active users is the primary user, is a primary metric that you'll see in GA4. And there's a number of distinct users who had visited your website or application. It's any active user who was engaged in the session, or when analytics collects a I don't know what's missing from that slide, to be honest. But yeah, it's essentially an engaged user. So a bit more than someone who's just simply like loaded up a page. Some of the critical settings that you might want to do when you've got your GA4 account set up. So this is like presuming like you've just followed the basic steps of creating a GA4 property. Perhaps you've put it live on the website already. If you're running other Google products, if you're like running Google Ads, or you've got any kind of other Google account, like a Search Console account or Merchant Center account, you have the ability to be able to link these accounts up. So Google Ads, being a good one to do, and this will allow communication between GA4 and the ad platform, and it will allow things like audience sharing and conversion importing. So you'll be able to share the data across both products. So that can be really useful to do. And it can also allow you to bring in cost metrics and clicks and impressions into GA4, as well as see other things like search queries and landing pages for like your SEO traffic, for example. When it comes to data retention, so by default it's 2 months, but you can switch this to 14 months, to the maximum of 14 months. You can do this within the data settings. And to be honest, it's something I just recommend you do. You have at least 12 months of like user data that you can kind of look at to explore activity. So I'd whack this right up to 14 months if you haven't done so already. You can actually, it's possible to go beyond 14 months, but then you have to get into setting cookie durations within the code and GTM. But within the interface, if you just switch it up to 14 months, that is my recommendation to do. I mentioned earlier that GA4 is data-driven, but within the admin settings, you also have the ability to be able to change the attribution model type, and you'll see there's different models available to use, and you can switch this at any point, and you'll see the data update differently within your standard report. So if you want to see it more based on a last click basis, like how Universal was reporting, then you are free to go into this and select it to like a last click basis. It'll be data driven by default, but it's up to you what other data driven, what other attribution models you choose to use. Another quite useful feature within GA4, and it's actually quite a good one, is it has built-in auto tracking already. So if you're if you're just maybe like a novice, a small business or whatever, and you just want to get going with Google Analytics, then there is auto tracking already built in, and this means it will track things like your outbound clicks. It will track things like site search, if someone's searching on your site. It'll track video engagement. It'll detect when someone downloads a file. So when someone clicks on a file extension, for example, and it now does form interactions also. So straight out of the box, this will track quite a bit. You might want to check that you have enhanced measurement enabled. And again, you'll find this within the admin area within your data stream settings. And if you don't know what a data stream is, I'm sorry, I'm not covering that off today, but just look it up. You'll find it within your admin area. So these are just some of the things to kind of keep an eye on. They won't always be super accurate and important and relevant. So you will want to kind of keep a bit of an eye on them. The one they've added more recently is the ability to be able to track form interaction. So you might start seeing that you're getting events come into your account of things like form submit, telling you you've had a form submitted on your website. that might be right or wrong depending on your setup on your website. So really, you need to be confident that what you're seeing, what analytics is automatically reporting, is actually accurate. So advanced users may want to use Google Tag Manager instead. And certainly if you're like a larger company, then you want to be working with a professional to make sure you've got everything tracked and reporting accurately and the best you can. So I'd always recommend, if you're not sure what you're doing, just paying some money to a consultant to help you get set up with your implementation. So conversion tracking, so this is quite a big one, and it's quite I guess quite a kind of shift in how things were tracked previously. So everything now that comes into GA4 is now tracked as an event, everything from a page view to a button click, scroll, interaction, file download or purchase, everything pours in as its own individual event. So everything is now an event. It's an event-based platform, so everything is tracked this way. These events are good in a lot of ways because they then offer you the flexibility to be able to isolate individual events, report against those individual events, turn those events into conversions. And when it comes to events, there's actually 3 different types. So there's ones that the pixel will just automatically collect straight out the box. So, page views, identifying the user and when a new visit is starting, user engagement and things like that. Then you've got these enhanced events, which are the ones I showed you on the previous screen, which are your things like your file downloads, your video plays, your form interactions and things like that. So provided that you've got enhanced measurement enabled, those things will also be tracked automatically, but they're classified as enhanced events. And then beyond that, if you need anything more kind of bespoke and custom, you've got some custom forms, you've got some specific buttons or items you need tracking, you've got an e-commerce site, you want to be able to track products and purchases and product revenue, then you're going to want to put in place custom code to get that tracked. So there is code provided, there's recommended code provided by Google for these different scenarios, especially for tracking like e-commerce transactions. You'll need the GA4 e-commerce code to ensure that you have e-commerce data coming into the account. This is where events come into. So one place you can find them is in the dedicated events section with just an event report. And it's every interaction on your website, basically, with an event count next to it, which on its own doesn't really kind of tell you a great lot, but it gives you an overview of the different events that are pouring in to the account and the volumes of those events. So, this is where you could see, how many button clicks you were getting on a particular thing, how many form submissions you had, things like that. But if you want to see like the GA4 events that you're receiving, you need to go into the event section, and this is where you'll see all of the different events, many events coming in. There's of course lots of other places and ways to access the events. A lot of the default reports, like this one, this is like a traffic acquisition report. This will also have a drop down for the different events, which you can then toggle and see for a particular event. So for example, if you wanted to see which traffic sources were driving a form submission, you could basically just toggle the event in the event column and select it to form submission, and then view and then see which traffic sources were driving those events. We can also convert those events into conversions. So if you remember in Universal Analytics, for those that obviously familiar with Universal Analytics, we used to have things, principles known as goals. So conversions used to be known as goals within Universal Analytics. Goals no longer exist, and even like the term goals has been is no longer used. So we use conversions now. And what you can do is with the events that are coming in, you can choose which events that you want to consider a conversion. So you can select up to 30 events, 30 conversions to mark as a conversion. My recommendations for this is that you just keep it very focused and specific. So if you are tracking form submissions on your website, then I would make sure that only form submissions on your website are marked as a conversion. Do not go through and mark every single thing as a conversion, because that just won't be useful for you going forwards. Because when you run like reports, you want to see how many conversions you had, then you're not going to be able to see like the detailed breakdown of what those conversions are, because you're not going to know what constitutes a conversion if you're forever turning toggles on and off. So I'd be very kind of focused with this. Just have it aimed at one thing. If you've got purchases get tracked as a conversion anyway, so you're fine on that front. But anything else outside of a purchase that you want to track, you'll as a conversion, you'll want to just be specific on. So if file downloads matters to you, then only select file downloads. If it's forms, then make sure you just got forms. But it's really important that you when you choose this, you just kind of keep it consistent, and you don't change it going forwards. Otherwise, it's going to muddy the waters and make your reporting quite difficult, and affect obviously conversion rates if you're tracking new and different things. With each of these events that we send in, we also have the ability to send in extra information. So we can send in custom event parameters. So if there's a video event, for example, we can send in like the name of that video and the video URL, for example. And there's lots of different parameters that we add to the different events. So you just need to know that it's possible to send in all this extra information. So you can send in 25 extra pieces of information with each event that you track. So you're going to want to think about what it is you need to actually migrate. So have a bit of a kind of measurement plan in advance. So if you've not thought about this for your GA4 setup, map out what it is you actually need to track, what's important to you. Think how that translates to your Universal Analytics and what you were tracking in Universal Analytics. I would say with GA4 is a great opportunity to restart again. So it's a blank slate. It's your opportunity to kind of approach your measurement in a different way, and perhaps come up with some new naming conventions, a better way to track what you need. So have a think about what it is you actually need to and want to track. So it's useful to go through, like literally make a list on a bit of paper. Make sure you've got all the you've got everything identified on your website that you want to be able to track and report on, the things that matter to you. So if it's form submissions, make sure that every single form is tracked, and then make sure you have a way to be able to identify which form it was that got submitted, for example. If it's e-commerce, then we want to put in place e-commerce tracking, and there's code by Google to enable all of that to happen. So yeah, really think about like your own tracking needs. Literally just like jot it down on paper, put it into a spreadsheet or whatever, and then you can plan your tracking in a more kind of systematic way. The best way to get information, get events and track stuff is, in my recommendation, Google Tag Manager. If you don't know what Google Tag Manager is, then you might be missing out. So Google Tag Manager is a single, it's a separate Google product to allow you to manage all of your pixels all in one interface. So rather than have lots of different bits of pixel code all across your website, you basically just have like one chunk of code, which is your Google Tag Manager code on your website. And then via Google Tag Manager, we have all of our different pixels loaded up via the interface. So really good for marketers. We can go in, we can update pixels really quickly. We can get stuff onto the site, edited, taken off the site really quickly without always involving a web developer in that process. So it lends itself a lot more consistency, and it's just a far more effective and better way to do things. And when it comes to GA4, much, much better way to go about your implementation. The second option is you can create basic events off of existing events. So for example, if you want to create a page URL, if you want to create you want to track like a thank you page or something like that, then you can actually do this within the interface as well. So your main option is to use Google Tag Manager, but in certain scenarios, you can also create a new event based off of an existing event within GA4 within the interface. So this is what it looks like when you're creating something in GTM. And again, the process actually for this is really simple. So if you've got Google Tag Manager already installed on your website, then a lot of stuff can, GTM offers a lot of auto tracking ability. So if you want to be able to like track an individual link click or something of that nature, you can put that in place, and you can track that and put in place a trigger to fire that event. And the tag setup itself is pretty simple. You just need to find the relevant GA4 tag type. You're going to enter in an event name, relevant event name, and then you're going to create a firing trigger. So you're going to tell Google Tag Manager when that should fire, whether it's on a URL, whether it's on a button ID, or any other kind of specific interaction with the website. You're going to want to create that trigger. And then from that, every time that event occurs, that event will then fire into GA4 and will be there in your events list to be able to do what you want with it, report on it, turn it into a conversion, etc., etc. Option 2 is the creating from existing events. So not the most user-friendly way, but actually once you kind of get your head around it and understand actually what is possible, then it kind of makes sense. So for example, if I wanted to track a blog article view instead of say just a general page view. So if I specifically wanted to be alerted and send in an event every time a blog article got viewed, I could create that directly within the interface without doing anything else. So I can go into my admin area, I can create a new event, and the event name will be the page view. So it will fire when a page view occurs, and when the page location, so when the page name contains blog, I will send a custom event name of blog article view. So this will be my new event that I'm sending in, and I'm doing that based on this criteria. And much of like GA4, a big half of the learning curve with it is understanding the actual metrics and the parameters that you're looking at. And I promise you, once you've actually spent a bit of time with this, it will all make a lot more like logical sense. So for example, page URL, for example, is page location. An event name is simply the name of the GA4 event being sent in. So there's lots of this kind of stuff. On first glance, you look at it, you think like, oh, what the hell does this mean? But actually, once you actually spend a little bit of time with it and you actually read the documentation, it will make sense. But I appreciate for a large amount of people, this is a bit of a learning curve. This is a bit like, oh goodness, like what does this all mean? So I fully appreciate that. When it comes to e-commerce tracking, you will want to upgrade your tracking, and you can do this in parallel if you want. So you can have in place your existing code and then put in place a new GA4 code. There is brand new schema. When I say schema, that is code structure. basically just JavaScript that needs to go onto the page. And again, I would use Google Tag Manager for all of this. So I'd make sure that I've got data layer code on the website, collecting what I need. So this is a job a web developer person would need to do. They'd need to take the Google documented code, e-commerce code. I need to put it onto the website, and I'll need to then pass in the details of that transaction into that data layer code, and then that in turn will enable the details to be passed into GA4 e-commerce.
Can I just interrupt you again, because I've got a question that I think you need to answer sort of in this context. So obviously somebody that's already been running GA3 and e-commerce, they'll be very familiar with this. They'll know they have to put a e-commerce code, tracking code on their website. But we've got quite a few very new people in the audience who are using things like Wix or a WordPress site or a Squarespace site. And they're not likely to be using Google Tag Manager. So could you just briefly explain how somebody like them would set up analytics for the first time? I don't know if you've got a screenshot on this later, so I just thought I'd ask now because you were talking about.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so a lot of you will be using like a Shopify site or you'll have a WordPress site. In those instances, there's a couple of ways to implement Google Analytics. So there's most of the time you'll need a plugin. So if you're using something like WordPress, you'll need to find a Google Analytics plugin. My recommendation is still to find a Google Tag Manager plugin and make sure that you've got the Google Tag Manager version of the code installed, and then run your analytics through Google Tag Manager. But however, if you are just happy just to you just want to get started really quickly with Google Analytics 4, then there's a number of plugins being released for WordPress. And even for Shopify, there's more products, more plugins coming out for Shopify. So there's already a native universal analytics one already in place for Shopify and WordPress, because these have been around for years now. But with GA4 being so new, there's not the selection of plugins available yet, but they are coming, and there's quite a few coming out now. So if you do have a Shopify site, for example, and you want to get GA4 onto your site, I would look into something like a GA4 plugin, like something like the free version of Elevar, ELEVAR. That's the Elevar plugin. They now offer like a free version of that tool, depending on how many sales you actually make each month. That's worth looking into. If not, you're looking at basically just dropping the code on manually, so just dropping it in within the template files, and you might need a bit of holding to do that. So if you do have any kind of off-the-shelf type of website CMS like that, what you're looking for is a Google Analytics 4 plugin that you can use with it. If not, you'll have to fall back to custom code.
Okay, so I've just, one of the people specifically asked about Wix. I've just done a search on Wix plugin for GA4, and it's providing lots of information there. So you tend to just have to do a search on something like that. The other thing is if you completely new to Google Tag Manager, I've pasted one of Ed's webinars on using Google Tag Manager. I think there's a couple actually. So we have done Google Tag Manager webinars before, which can help you understand how to use it. But for the majority of you, if you just do the plugin, you literally get the code from GA4, or even just the number of the GA4 account, and that's all you need to add in. So it's relatively simple, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. It is. In a lot of instances, and most of the time, it is the best way to do it. If you've got if you've got one of these sites, you use a plugin, and that way ensure that everything gets tracked. It's especially good with e-commerce reporting, because with a few clicks of the button, it will make sure that you've got all your e-commerce tracking in place. Your add to cart tracking, your checkout, product views, and all the product details and everything that gets purchased at checkout, you'll have all of that collected. So it will do that kind of hard work for you without the need to, custom code everything. So yeah, where possible, use a plugin. If not, then you'll have to fall back to doing a manual implementation.
Quite a few questions coming in, but I think we need to let you finish because otherwise we'll run out of time.
Yeah, I'm going to do. I've only got a couple more slides, and then I'm going to open up the shop floor for some questions.
Yeah.
So one I want to show you is just like some reporting opportunity in GA4. So it's the ability to use this new kind of Explorer area here. So if you want to do produce any kind of like custom report, especially like a funnel report, GA4 does a pretty good job at giving you the tools to create and build your own reports. And I really like the what they've actually included, and hopefully they'll build on this a bit more. But they'll offer you this kind of library of like starter template reports that you can literally just click on and start messing around with. And that will enable you to like build out like your own funnels. You'll be able to build out shopping reports, your own user journeys. And yeah, it just offers a lot more customization and flexibility than what we ever had before in Universal Analytics. Universal Analytics is very rigid and fixed and quite difficult to work with, whereas GA4 is giving you the ability to be able to do your own analysis using the data. And the analysis section of GA4 is lends itself really well to that. So this is one of the kind of more impressive parts of it, and an area that I like. So you can build out your own funnel journeys based on different steps and criteria and things like that. This is like a checkout funnel, for example, I've got here. You can run a path analysis. Where you can basically see how people are clicking and interacting with your site. So the pages they're going to before perhaps a conversion occurs. So perhaps from when the person lands, for example, all the way through to when they actually convert, or from working backwards from when they converted, and you can see the steps that led up to that conversion, for example. So we've got this path analysis tool here as well. And there's lots of other different types. So obviously, like you can run table reports, you can run pie charts and overlap Venn diagram type reports. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. So if you've had GA4 for a while, you've got a bit of data, go into this exploration area and have a bit of a play around. There's some good stuff in there. There is a Google GA4 demo store. So if you don't have GA4 set up and you just want to know more about it and want to play around with it, then Google offers a demo version which you can get access to. It's a live kind of like working Google site, and an account that's like fully populated. So you can Google that by simply searching for GA4 demo account or GA4 demo store. And then you'll be taken to a Google article, and within that article there's a couple of links. So anyone wants access to that, then Google the GA4 demo store. So in summary, like the roadmap you need to take is make sure you've got the basics installed, and make sure you've got GA4 across all pages with enhanced measurement turned on. At this stage, I would start, we're in January now, I would recommend that you start to think about the conversion setup. So if you've had GA4 in place for a while, maybe think about having making sure that you've got your conversion tracking set up, like you've got some of your main KPIs tracked. So, if it's form submissions, if it's purchases, make sure you've got those tracked and that tracking is accurate. Look into, this is where you really need a bit of a consultant really to make sure that you're tracking the right things and that your data is clean, but you obviously want to make sure that your data isn't being polluted. with anything. So it's really important you've got a robust setup and you've got everything tracked as you need to. Make sure you integrate your products. So once to do a Google Ads search console, you can do that with a few clicks of a button. You're going to want to migrate any existing goals that you had in Universal to GA4. And again, GA4 might give you the opportunity to start from scratch, do things better than how you did it before. But if there are metrics, things that you want to track, then you might want to do like a like-for-like version in GA4 also. So think about what you need to track and then make sure you've actually got that track within GA4. You can enrich the tracking with additional customer dimensions and e-commerce. So again, make sure you've got the e-commerce tracking in place. You've got details about like the different products. Make sure you've got that fully implemented if you're an e-commerce site. Perhaps if you're tracking form submissions, maybe make sure that you've got the individual forms tracked and the different form types tracked. So we can put in send in extra information. So make sure you do that via custom dimensions and custom metrics. And think about in the future preparing to export historical reports from Universal Analytics. So you won't need to do this until like the second half of this year, really. And we'll be coming out with more advice of how to do that as the time gets nearer. We'll also be listening out for like further announcements from Google as to what exactly is going to happen with Universal Analytics. So they might, for example, choose to like extend how long you can keep the data for. So at the moment, everything's a bit up in the air. We don't know, but these are certainly the steps we need to take at this point. So yeah, I think let's open up the shop for some questions, because I'm sure like a lot of you have a lot of different questions and challenges that you're kind of currently stuck on.
Okay, so I've just been going through some of them. So the first one is generally quite a lot of nervousness about how to install it in the first place. So questions like, do I need a new pixel? Is there a plugin for my particular platform? Those sorts of general questions.
Yeah.
And I think probably sometimes if you just go to GA3, there's a button and it almost automatically guides you. But I wonder if you could give us a bit of advice on that.
Yeah, so there's some tools that are built into GA3, for example, to encourage you to migrate to GA4. And it will guide you through like a number of steps that it makes out, simplifies the process. So, within a couple of clicks, you can bring stuff across. But often what happens with that is you get whilst it might be quicker to do, the actual quality of what you're bringing across will just like pollute the data you've got. So for example, if you start bringing across old events, you start bringing across goals, what you'll find is that not everything gets transferred across as it is. So things will change, things will break. So what you had in Universal Analytics doesn't automatically translate to GA4, and that becomes quite problematic. So my advice would be to just ignore the actual setup assistant part of it and just simply create the new property and look to get that pixel installed and start from scratch and build it out that way.
And a lot of people run them in parallel, don't they? Because we want to keep the old data for as long as we can. And actually, at some point, you need to export it to put it somewhere. Somebody's been asking about Data Studio, and I know that we've created. So there's two questions there about keeping it longer, I guess. But we've been creating separate Data Studio reports for GA4 and keeping our old reports for GA3. So I think we might need to talk about that. Yeah. And then the other thing people are really worried about is that they're not going to get the same data that they're used to. And I made a comment in the chat that a lot of people reproduce their old reports because there isn't an equivalent. So I think maybe a little general discussion around the reporting and the best way of doing that might be quite useful.
Yeah. And we'll definitely have to do a different session on reporting. And back to like the data studio. So like, well, let's just backtrack a little bit. So I've mentioned like the default reports in GA4 like aren't the best, and for a while people were using Google Data Studio, like the dashboarding tool, in order to do like use the data from GA4 and present it in the way they needed to, because it was a lot more flexible. Following some updates last year, from November time, Google have made a massive boo-boo with the how GA4 integrates with Looker Studio. They've literally basically rendered it, GA4 reporting in Looker Studio, useless. So it's a real problem at the moment for like the clients like we work with, you know, who have like big dashboards with like self-serve facilities. Basically like the dashboards are breaking, and everyone's been up in arms about it just generally across the industry. And this is like a real problem. We've been ourselves as an agency, we've been scrabbling around for a fix, and we've personally found a fix ourselves via another product. But the actual using the data from GA4 in a reporting sense and pulling that out from GA4 is really problematic at the moment. We are still kind of like keeping an ear out for any further announcements from Google as to what they're going to do about this problem.
I mean, if you're using Data Studio at the moment and you're bringing in something like Facebook data, you're probably using something like Supermetrics already, which was almost like a halfway house fix for us, wasn't it? So maybe that could be something that people.
Yeah, and again, it's not a problem with Data Studio. It's a problem with the GA4 API. So if you're using that, if you're trying to bring in data from Google Analytics 4, that is the problem right now. So I couldn't even do a presentation today on Looker Studio, because if I was to run a report, things would just break. So they're really making it unusable. My advice is to continue to use Universal Analytics. Make sure you've got your GA4 set up, and that's the best it can be. Make sure you've got that in the background, and you can kind of dip into that for certain metrics and reports and things. But I would keep your Universal reporting, if you've got that set up in the way that you like. I'll just keep that for as long as possible. Just make sure you've got GA4 set up in behind the scenes, that you're actually collecting the data you need at this point, because then you know what's going to happen come July. Then you're going to have to like lean back on that data full time. But hopefully by then some things will be resolved, and it'll be a bit more of a kind of workable setup we have.
So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been training the staff to use the exploration reporting hub. I think I'm not sure if that's exactly the right name. It's got Explorer. And the reason why is that we can almost reproduce the same reports as we had in GA3, and that because there's sort of issues with the standard reports within GA4, like all the reports just show daily, whereas, if you're used to using Universal Analytics, you can change it to weekly or monthly on the graphs. So one of the things I do recommend is that you do learn how to use the Exploration Center. And maybe we could do another webinar just on the practice, because I mean, you've done it for all our team in the last couple of months, haven't you? Maybe you could do a practical session on how to use the reporting. So if you think that would be useful, guys, please put a message. I'm going to quickly bring up a couple of things as the offers. Katie, is there any other messages questions that need answering from the chat?
There's been some very, very detailed ones in Q&A, which have got like 5 questions in one, and I just don't think we've got time to kind of go over those. So if I save them, I can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to stay on doing answering in the Q&A in the background anyway, the ones we've got. So
let's do that. Let's do that anyway. So for any of you, there's various different. If you go through to the web page, there's various different. The minimum, I think, package is something like 850 quid just to set it all up. and get yourself a mini dashboard on the go. So this is a sort of all-encompassing day with training and everything as well. So for some of you, that might be more than you need. But if you want to click on that link, that would be amazing. The other thing I'd quite like to do is, if any of you found this useful today, if you could give a Google review for Ed. So I've just put that one up as well. So if you could write us a Google review, and then we're going to hang around and answer a few more questions, if that's okay. So I know that some of you have to go at 10. Thank you, Katie. So if any of you like to leave us, Ed, we need to update that because it's over 300 now. Every time we bring that up, I always sort of say it's out of date because we get lots of reviews as a result of doing these webinars. Yeah, so I'm quite happy to ask Ed a few more questions. A lot of people saying a practical would be very useful. We did sort of say in a way that the trouble with analytics is if you're not familiar with using GA3, going from GA3 to GA4, it is, if you are familiar with GA3 to GA4, you understand it better, but it's actually harder from a perspective that everything doesn't quite work the way you expect it. If you're going straight into GA4, you'll probably find it easier to use than somebody that's familiar with universal analytics. It's just that the lingo will be less familiar with you. So I think if you see the practical use of it in a follow-up webinar in probably 3 or 4 weeks, then you might find that pretty useful. Let me just ask you the questions in the Q&A. So, okay, let me see what Google has emailed. Okay, we've got a couple. URL extension. When GA4 has been applied, should the permalinks extend to very long items with UTM details? Seeing this when clicking on a page when visiting that are using GA4, is this because a setting option GA4 has not been selected correctly? Example of an extension. Yeah, he's got an example. If you go into the Q&A, you'll be able to read this, Ed. It's next to the chat. That doesn't look like that's a... Why would you get all that stuff at the end? Is that something that somebody's done wrong in the settings? That looks like that's going to have come through from somewhere else.
Yeah, it does. That looks like it might be coming in via another product. It might be something like, I don't know, if you're running HubSpot. That's not something that would naturally happen with GA4.
No, I agree.
Yeah, to see that kind of stuff is common because GA4 will bring in the full URL with query strings as well. So it's quite common to see a lot of like messy query strings coming in. But as to what that is specifically, that would seem like you've got another type of tracking product on the website, or another tool that's obviously brought someone to the site.
And the next question is about Google automatically updating. We definitely recommend that you run them in parallel so you can go and you can utilize you can still access the old data for a while. And I'm assuming when they actually create a new one, they don't delete the old one at that top point, do they, Ed?
No, keep your existing universal analytics in place. And again, it kind of comes down to like how it's been implemented and what version of the code you're using. For example, if you're using like the G tag, it's literally just like an extra line you need to add to it. So it's just an update of the code. If you're using an older version, then it'll be like you'll just need like to have a brand new pixel on the site. But the recommendation is to use the Google Tag Manager just generally. So make sure you've got Google Tag Manager in place and you run your GA4 pixel through Google Tag Manager instead.
So to the people that are not familiar, Google Tag Manager acts as sort of like a container tag where you can go and load your all of the tags from Google, Facebook, your email marketing, analytics, whatever it is, HubSpot. You can load it in one place through a dashboard rather than having to get your developer to load it up for you. One of the things that the advantage of creating a GA4 account yourself is that you can keep both of the tracking pixels, one for GA3 and one for GA4, on your site at the same time. So you get data in both. And then that at least means you've got an overlap period and you compare what the differences are. So we did some work this week, and we were looking at the differences in Facebook in GA3 versus GA4, and GA4 was something like 66% lower than GA3. So, you know, we know because it works in a different way that the data you were getting before is going to change. So you really sort of need to be able to understand the difference if you particularly if you've got a bigger site and you're spending a lot of money on advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Yeah.
Okay, will the world end on July the 1st? In my opinion, it will, because it's a bloody nightmare using GA4, and we're all having to learn how to use something completely different. So I'm not very happy about it. But somebody liked that comment. We think you're going to get at least 6 months data, but what we'll do as we get nearer to July, we'll start giving information about how to pull the data off, and so you can archive it. But at this point, I guess the Exploration Centre is quite good for doing your reports, making reports. So I think if we offer a training in that towards the end of the month or beginning of the next month, you'll find that very helpful, because it's actually in some ways easier to use that and create your own reports of exactly what you want. So we'll sort that out for you. No, the next part, will their old GA tracking code automatically redirect to populate the new GA4? That's not right, is it?
No, it is a case of reinstalling, starting from fresh. So yeah, if you are using the old code, that'll stop tracking come July.
So somebody's asked a question about purchase tracking. So somebody's probably a bit more advanced user here. They've been using the setup assistant, and then there's one called purchase, and one's grayed out. And how do you get rid of it if you don't want any more?
Yeah, so the the event known as purchase is the default recommended one. That's the one that is standard, that you should be using. So that's just generally tied to the e-commerce reporting. And that event is what brings in all of the other details about the transaction. So purchase is like the default name, is what you should be using. If you do have a separate one, which is like your make_a purchase, that is obviously that's a custom event. And if that's been brought across, then I don't know, presumably maybe it's like that's your you've got that you might have had that set up as like a destination goal. Maybe it's like the thank you page or something of the site. Yeah, if you want to track purchases, then just use the purchase event and make sure you've got the e-commerce tracking in place to bring in the information with that purchase event.
Okay, next question then is, did review last week, is this the same account? Oh yeah, this was to do, Michael's asking about reviewing. If you quite a lot of people leave reviews on a regular basis. So if you it's really because we're sort of also reviewing the individual topics as well. So somebody will say, oh yeah, it was a great review for a great webinar from Tom. He did an excellent job on creative. And then they'd say it was a great webinar from Anne. She did ChatGPT. So it's just spreading your love a little bit. But if you want to make it a bit more specific to that specific topic, then people will understand that's what we were talking about. Okay, should we expect data modeling to be enabled? We have a GA4 property for a good number of months, or is this likely to be a problem specific to our implementation?
So the data modeling side of the data modeling aspect kicks in with certain thresholds and certain amounts of data. Off the top of my head, I couldn't actually tell you what those thresholds are.
That's the number of users or the amount of traffic to the site. Is that what you mean?
It's the amount of users, there has to be a certain amount of data for Google to be able to and a certain amount of time that's passed and a certain amount of conversion data in order for analytics to be able to do its thing and model those numbers. So there is a threshold. So if you're a very small site with only like a trickle of visitors every day, then data modeling is not really going to come into play. It's going to come into play for like larger sites that are getting like a couple of thousand visitors a day to their site. and it comes in a variety of ways, and there is there is also like a bit of a kind of opt-out feature from data modeling. So if you don't want your data to be modeled, then you can instruct Google within the admin area, and it is a reporting identity. You can choose to change the setting from a blended to a modeled approach, and it basically will exclude the modeling aspect, so it will leave that part of it out. So yeah, it's a good question. It's generally taking place when there's a certain amount of visitors coming in. And I don't know what that threshold is.
I'm just trying to see if I can find it, but it's not particularly. I just done a couple of searches. It's not particularly easy to find. So you might have to do some searches, but it might be worth checking that setting anyway, mightn't it? Just in case it's set to the wrong one.
Yeah.
If you've got a big amount of traffic and you think you should be getting it, then. The next question is use of Google Tag Manager. I think they may have misunderstood how we use Google Tag Manager, so this might be quite helpful for them. So would you need to switch the code over to GA4 at the point where we're already making the switch, or do you do it in a different way? I think they're sort of implying that you change GA3 to GA4, whereas we say we add it in, don't we? So maybe you can do that.
Yeah, so if you are using Google Tag Manager and you're sending like a lot of data into Universal Analytics, what you'll need to do is create brand new tags for GA4, and the setup of those tags is quite different. Different, not like tremendously different. So yeah, the way in which you set up those GA4 tags are different, because you're using everything that goes into GA4 is an event, so you'll be setting it as an event name. So it really kind of comes down to what you're tracking in each platform and how that translates. So, for example, if you're sending a file download as an event into Universal Analytics, then there's no reason why you can't send in a file download event into GA4 as well, and you should just be tracking the same thing. But it will require separate tags.
Excellent. I don't think there's any more questions. Lots of love coming in. People have found it really useful. I know this
reviews.
Yeah, I know that this is quite difficult when people haven't used, are not really familiar with the analytics. In fact, the new cohort of trainers this week, I've sort of said that maybe should watch this session later on. Yes, interesting. Somebody said they've taken the attitude that GA3 is already dead and we're reporting using just GA4. Then it's going to be it's not going to become a shock in July. I think that's a really good idea, and we're starting to do the same. Interestingly, I was talking to another agency, somebody who works in another agency, and they said that they're really behind on getting all their clients switched over. I think we've only got a couple of clients that are not on GA4 already. And we took a view to try and get at least a year's worth of overlap data.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
But so we started this process a year ago. Let us know if you need anything else. I think that's it for now. I don't think there's any more questions.
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Oh no, Marcel says, I can't see total revenue in GA4. I can see the numbers purchased, but not the value. What should I do? Well, that's going to be he may not be here still. I don't know whether Marcel's still here, but that's going to be the way that the e-commerce tracking is set up, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be an implementation issue for sure.
He is still here, so
okay. What would you recommend to help him out then, Ed? Has he got to speak to his developer, or?
Yeah, it'll come down to obviously how you've actually implemented it. So if you're collecting the data through Google Tag Manager, or whether you've implemented a plugin in order to collect that revenue data. So understanding the implementation is important. Go into your e-commerce reports to see whether that is populated, whether you have product details in there and item revenue available. If you don't have that, then you're obviously missing a chunk of thing, because you could be sending in a purchase event, but you might not have all the transactional information tied to that. So that might be the bit you're missing. You might find out that you don't have transaction IDs, you don't have product details or anything else like that, and revenue. So yeah.
Is there a pixel checker or anything that a tag assist or anything they can use to see what's been fired?
You can use, so you can use the, and again, it depends on whether you've got Google, how you've implemented your pixel. That's the thing. It's not straightforward to do. If you have implemented by Google Tag Manager, then best thing to do is to use the analytics debug tool, load up your website, actually walk through the process, and then see all of the events that get passed through as you actually complete a purchase. To do a test transaction, and then look at what's been populated. But my first port of call would be to go into my e-commerce reports and check to see whether I've got any transactional data and product information at all. If I don't have that, then I know that I don't have e-commerce tracking installed.
So you can see the transactions, but you can't see the detail of what information associated with each of those transactions.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Ed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you. We're going to stop the recording now, but the recording will go out in the next couple of hours. So hopefully, there's still 33 people hanging around.